Has anyone moved house recently? And maybe recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe. So I used to think that I'm quite a minimalist. I think probably most of us strive towards some degree of simplicity in life. Why complicate things? But whenever I move house, I realize how much stuff I have. Have you had that experience? Dear. There was a time where Natasha and I were starting out for the first few years of our kind of fledgling family life. We were moving house every 11 months, and we started off with virtually nothing, just a few backpacks really, and everything that we could squeeze into those. But year on year, the kind of bits and pieces tended to accumulate. Then we spent a few years living in Lewisham, and then by the end of that, having to move where we are now, realised, oh my goodness. And I've got some friends who I asked to help, I think family as well, asked to help with the moving, and Gordon Bennett, the number of trips you have to do, you think, yeah, probably just 3 more trips, that'll do. And then after 3 more trips, you're thinking, yeah, 7 more trips. So just get all the stuff that you've got from one place to another. Oh dear, this simple life, this minimalist dream, it's not really working out. Oh dear. Should I be shameful about that? Should we feel let down by the fact that we're perhaps accumulating stuff? Interesting question. Of course, we live in quite an interesting time in the context of human history where, relatively speaking, humanity finds itself finding all kinds of needs and wants that simply didn't exist even just a few hundred years ago. If you think about how humanity existed and survived for millennia, we would just about get by with a hut, some sheds to live under, with some rags to put around ourselves, and maybe if we had some luxury, maybe a wooden bowl from which to eat our food or something like that. Simple things, no real fuss about luxury or superfluous items. But yet here we are, where we find all kinds of excuses to exchange quite large amounts of money for things which maybe we think we want and need, but if we were to reflect about it in the grand scheme of survival, actually they're completely meaningless, completely superfluous. And yet, maybe there is still value to frilly doilies and smartphones which can do incredible things. I remember when I was growing up, I really wanted to have a portable TV. So I could watch TV whenever I wanted. And now virtually mobile phones do that. And I don't watch an awful lot of TV on it, to be fair. But it's incredible to think how over the last few hundred years, capitalism and materialism has really flourished and developed in human society. And there are interesting philosophical reactions to this. Of course, I've mentioned on the idea of living a simple life. Maybe some of us aspire to that. Maybe actually some of us do subscribe to the materialist lifestyle, whereby I absolutely have to wear the latest fashions in terms of my clothes. I get my fashion magazines and I'm looking out for the latest seasons and the latest interests. I try to follow very closely what's going on. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I'm going to ask that question, put it out there. What do you think? What do you think about it? Yeah, some people would look at this materialism, the focus on making sure you've got a nice house, making sure you've got a nice vehicle, nice car maybe, making sure that your handbag matches with your shoes. Concepts I had no idea about growing up, but getting married, you discover things like that. Just a disclaimer for everyone. I have virtually zero natural fashion consciousness. I would look like a hobo if I wasn't given guidance and instruction. So I benefit hugely or anyone who gives me constructive advice on what clothes to wear and how to present myself a bit more respectively. But there are some folks who would say that this materialism, this focus on the material, is not good. Because all this focus on material frivolity is a distraction from what really matters. And these folks, maybe the kind of Puritan type folks who maybe value virtue over wealth. And so they would actually promote and encourage the shunning of wealth. Stay away from accumulating material prosperity, from accumulating possessions and things, and try to just focus on an intentionally simple life, focusing on virtue. Religious people tend to fall into that category, not exclusively. There are overlaps, but there are some religious folks who don't subscribe to that philosophy, and even some folks who are not terribly religious who also subscribe to that philosophy. But in this kind of worldview, there's a shunning of the material to focus on the virtuous. You could say maybe the spiritual or the internal. And there's something to be said for that. I think materialism isn't just about focusing on things and having lots of things, or having the latest things, or being able to buy lots of things to kind of maybe substitute, I would argue, maybe substituting for real happiness in one's life. The kind of shopaholics who do retail therapy. I feel happy because I buy things. I was reading a news article where this woman was spending up to £700 a month on clothes every month, and she didn't even wear them half the time. She would buy them, take them home, maybe wear it once, and then take it back to the shop and ask for a refund. £700 a month. For some people, that's their rent. Their monthly rent. So that's an awful lot of money. If she has the money to spend, go ahead. But I'm worried about that. It just sounds like shopping for shopping's sake to make one feel happy. It's not just that, materialism. I think materialism is also ignoring the internal reality of life. It is the failure to recognize that there is virtue in life, that there are internal qualities. And that also is in respect of the human body, that I see myself as a material object, that I fail to recognize the internal value and qualities within me. And my body just becomes maybe a piece of meat or a piece of art that I feel to dress up or decorate however I intend to communicate something about myself, or something which really kind of irritates me is this expression, my body, my choice. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, it's particularly within the kind of feminism and female, the restoration of female identity and female rights, in particular to do with reproductive health and whether one wants to have a pregnancy or not, and these kinds of ideas. My body, my choice. There's something to be said for that. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but what I'm afraid of is that there's a sense of materialism even in that kind of thinking. It's a worldview that I want to challenge here. The materialistic worldview whereby everything that matters is just material. That there is nothing internal, there is nothing virtuous, it's just stuff. Stuff exists, I am stuff, and I'm going to do the stuff which I have in the way that I want. And I'm concerned that there's an inherent danger in that worldview, which maybe some of us, to a lesser or greater extent, fall into sometimes. But then there's the other extreme, which is focusing wholeheartedly on the internal, the virtuous, the puritanical, and failing to recognize material needs, or even material value. I don't know if you've noticed, but downstairs, the children's ministry and the youth ministry, they're having a little bit of a party, celebration to commemorate all sorts of things put together. It's autumn time, so there's Harvest Festival, that kind of idea. It's Halloween tomorrow, which connects with the Celtic festival of Samhain, and then also the more recent Christian tradition of All Saints' Day, and then the even more recent tradition, which is quite secular and not necessarily harmful, neutral. The current celebrations of Halloween, it's a bit of fun, and kids like to have a bit of fun. Also, tomorrow we have a holy day. It's True Children's Day tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing, I hope, quite a few of you tomorrow at the pledge service that we're having. But even there's a material aspect to it, isn't it? That we prepare a physical offering, we prepare a table, we iron the tablecloths, we create these, towers of offering, we dress nicely. The kids downstairs, they're, dressed up in costumes and they're looking, some of them are looking funny, some of them are looking silly, but they're all really happy. Check out Dawn Pollard, she looks like a doe. A deer, a female deer. She's got these ears and she's got the makeup on, so I hope someone gets a photograph of her before she goes home and cleans herself up, so we can put that on social media afterwards. Now, if one is too focused on the internal, if one is too, maybe, I don't know what the word is, I'm trying to describe myself here, actually. I used to be the kind of party pooper who hated Halloween, and even to a certain extent, the commercialism associated with Christmas. Yeah, because I'm sure, we're in the end of October, and there's loads of Christmas stuff being thrown at us. I believe the Oxford Street Christmas lights are being turned on next week. That's the kind of state we're in, and there's a part of me which really rebelled against that, and I hated all of this kind of materialism associated with what fundamentally are deeply internal things. I've become quite a pedant around Halloween because I remind everybody what the words literally mean. The Eve of All Hallows. It's meant to be a holy day that we remember all saints, and but even in our contemporary society today, which has lost and forgotten its Christian heritage, most folks don't celebrate Halloween, like All Hallows anymore. So what does it mean to celebrate Halloween? It's lost its context, it's lost its meaning. And I'm afraid of that. But there's a sense in which that can go too far. There's a sense in which you can focus too much on the internal, too much on the virtuous, and neglect the material. Neglect the fact that human beings aren't just spiritual, but that we are material also. It's a kind of Gnostic dualism where everything spiritual is good and everything material is bad. And that's not how God intended it. That's not how God designed it. That if we just focus on virtue, our society never develops. We don't find opportunities to create new things or discover new things or develop new things because we're just focusing on these internal things. And in a sense, there have been societies which have intentionally shunned the development of the material aspects of society for that purpose. And I don't think that's healthy either. We need to find a way to balance and harmonize between what is of virtue and what is of wealth. And even philosophically speaking, philosophers have emerged who, some of them felt in the end, well, you know what, we should abandon virtue and just focus on the material. And others, philosophers, would argue, no, let's abandon the material and just focus on the virtue. Because you can't have both. That's what they were arguing. You can't have both. But with the unification movement, we believe that this world that God created should exist in harmony. And indeed, there are philosophers who have argued, no, there should be wealth, and there should be virtue, and that wealth should be imbued with virtue. And this is something that I feel we should also consider and take responsibility for, not only in our own lives, but also in the society around us. So I want to share with you, first of all, a quotation from the Exposition of the Divine Principle. And I've got two little quotations that I want to share with you from Father Moon's words, both of which come from separate conferences to do with ICUS, the International Conference for the Unity of the Sciences. I was very grateful that Patricia shared her testimony just now about her experience with the UPF retreat and the virtue and power that the Universal Peace Federation can have. And in this country, certainly, I'm very excited by the little seeds which we're beginning to plant of building up ICUS once again through our UPF Foundation. I'm really happy to hear how internationally as well ICUS is developing, or being resurrected. I tried looking at the website and there's nothing there. We need to resurrect the website, that's a start. There's a material thing. Having a good website, you can't run a professional organisation these days without having a good website. But okay, I'm going to share these quotations with you, we're going to reflect on them and hopefully come up with some ideas about how we can bring virtue to wealth, to the material. So first of all, in the introduction to the exposition of the Divine Principle, it says that in order for God's providence of salvation to be completely fulfilled, this new truth should first elevate the idealism of the democratic world to a new level, and then use it to assimilate materialism, and finally bring humanity into a new world. It's always important to reflect on when things are written, when things are said or spoken, because the timing of it usually has some significance. And what I find significant about this text is that it was written in the 1950s and translated into English in the 1960s, particularly targeting a Korean Christian audience. And if one reflects on the state of Korea and Christianity in Korea in the 1950s and 1960s, you have a divided nation ravaged not only by occupation, not only by world war, but also by civil war. A divided nation that's trying to rebuild itself, which at this point in time, the communist North is doing a lot better than the democratic South. And even then, the label democratic South, if you're familiar with Korean politics over the last week, you'll realize democracy in South Korea is a bit of an interesting thing. It's quite, let's just leave it at that. It's quite interesting. But here, this text is communicating about the need for a new truth to appear, which does three things. First, it elevates the idealism of the democratic worldview. That in order to protect that nation, and if you understand not just the local, regional importance of that nation, but indeed the worldwide, even cosmic importance of that nation. Because Father and Mother Moon, as the true parents of heaven and humankind, they're not just taking responsibility for their own local backyard, but they're trying to take responsibility for the whole cosmos. They need a foundation upon which to stand to serve the cosmos. And so this country that they're aiming to restore needs to first elevate the idealism of the democratic worldview. And that's what our movement primarily did for several decades. Promoting the democratic worldview, fighting against the communist, materialistic worldview in order to claim the victory. And indeed, we look at the Cold War, we look at how history developed. The Iron Curtain fell, the Soviet Empire crumbled, and the democratic worldview, you could argue, won the Cold War. Of course, there are maybe many different ways of analysing that. Was the victory complete? You can kind of see the embers of socialism reviving again, and you can also see the corruption of the democratic world as capitalism has flourished and people are now reacting against that. But this was time sensitive. First, the goal was to elevate the idealism of the democratic world view. Then what next? Then use this democratic world to assimilate materialism. Not to reject and destroy and disregard materialism, but to assimilate it. so that it becomes part of the democratic world, so that there's a relationship between this, what in unificationist jargon we would describe as the Abel-type worldview and the Cain-type worldview. That these two worldviews are brothers who need to harmonize with one another and support one another. That the democratic worldview needs to support the material worldview. And when we study Father Moon's words about Huish and about materialism, he's talking about the equalization of distribution, allowing the equalization of technology, so that those nations and areas, regions which have wealth, which have economic and technological ability, can share the harvest with the rest of the world. Have we done that? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's a good question to ask ourselves. But we see the world still with painfully stark contrasts between the incredibly wealthy and the incredibly poor. The equalization and distribution of wealth and technology is still something that we need to do. So stage 2 in this 3-part process, I feel we're in the middle of it right now. To assimilate materialism into our democratic worldview, and then finally bring humanity into a new world. Not harkening back to some old way of doing things, it's inventing something entirely new, something that's never been done before. We need to have some creative, imaginative thinking as we approach this challenge, as we approach the challenge of bringing harmony between virtue and material. This was written in the 1960s or 1950s. What did Father Moon say in the 1980s? I've got 2 quotations to share with you here. Firstly, again, thinking about this idea of a new world, a new cultural revolution can only come on the foundation of absolute values. These cannot be relative values, grounded in the changing world of phenomena. Rather, they must be universal and ultimate values, grounded in the unchanging world of essence and cause, in the fundamental relationships between God, human beings, and the universe. This is True Father's address to the 12th Huish, the 12th International Conference on Unity of the Sciences, in 1983. So here he's talking about the need for absolute values. And this is something which I think all humanity, deep down in our original minds, we're all longing for. We are all longing for absolute values. But funnily enough, the way we're finding them is challenging. Some folks find themselves saying that there are no absolute values, which is ironic because that itself is an absolute statement. And so it's a cyclical paradox. But if this universe does have absolute values, then we need to find out what they are. And what True Father is saying here is that these absolute values are grounded not in the changing world of phenomena, not in the material that we see around us, which shifts and changes according to the fashions and the seasons, but rather they are rooted in something unchanging, in the world of essence and cause. What he's talking about here is God. Now he's speaking to an academic community, maybe some of whom approach this idea of essence and cause in maybe a bit more theoretical way, a bit more academic way. Maybe they don't have such a living relationship with our heavenly parent, but they can at least rationalize something about this idea that there is an essence, a cause that we can find absolute values from. And do you see the very interesting relationships that Father Moon cites here, that he's asking us to pay attention to? He's asking us to pay attention to the fundamental relationships between God, human beings, and the universe. What do those 3 things remind you of? They remind me of the 3 great blessings. That every individual needs to have a living relationship with God, where our minds and bodies are united, centering on God. Where the mind, which focuses on virtue, harmonizes with the body, which focuses on the material, and brings harmony centered on God's will. Then there's harmony between human beings, where in the most fundamental unit of human society you have a husband and a wife, each with different perspectives, with different needs, with different views, but trying to harmonise, centering on the will of God and raise a family. And then even you bring harmony in the universe. The created world has also something, a perspective, a view, something of value to bring, but it needs human beings to guide that value out. Harmony needs to come between human beings and the universe. We have a formula here that the absolute values we're looking for come primarily from God, our Creator, and from God's blueprint for human joy and flourishing, which is the three great blessings. It's quite simple. And humanity has known about these for quite a while, but we're seemingly finding difficulty in realizing them. The final quotation I want to share with you comes from just a few years later, 1986, from the 15th Vicus. Father Moon says, today's human society is corrupt. It's not just true in 1986, it's also true in 2016. Today's human society is corrupt, and philosophies are becoming self-centered. To sweep away these philosophies, only God's love, true love, can suffice. True love is the love to give and give without expecting any return. Give and forget. Once we maintain this relationship with God, we are given the privileges of dominion, independence, and inheritance. It really is that simple. Materialism works if it's living for the sake of others. If it's built on God's true love. We are, through a new worldview, elevating the idealism of democracy and assimilating materialism and using that to create a new world. So the material is good if it's for God's purposes, if it's in harmony with the law of living for the sake of others, the law of true love. Here, True Father is basically saying, to sweep away these philosophies, true love suffices. You don't need to be very clever. Maybe some people here in the room switch off at the idea of philosophy. Maybe for some of us, we get switched on. Oh, I love talking about philosophy. But some of us don't have a philosophical mind. It doesn't matter. You can sweep it all away with true love. Because that's the only philosophy that trumps everything else. It really is that simple. Maybe that's the painful realization. We already know the answer to this question. We know it's true love. But we've heard this idea many, many times before. Yet putting it into practice is so hard. Have you ever been to, a birthday party or a wedding celebration where there is so much money, tens of thousands of pounds maybe spent on weddings these days? You go along and you're impressed by the meal that's provided and the elaborate decorations and all the whistles and bells which are thrown into this event. But while you're there, you kind of feel like, empty. You feel like the spirit's missing. And you know what? A year or two later, that couple gets divorced anyway. Whereas you could have quite a simple, humble wedding where not an awful lot of money is spent, very simple, but there's an elegance there, there's a beauty there. My wife and I, we had an incredibly humble wedding, and actually, in hindsight, I wish we had put a little bit more effort into it to make it a nicer occasion for everybody that we had invited. My brother Stephen didn't get an invitation. And, he was stuck on SDF at the time, and I didn't even think of inviting him. So sorry, Stephen. That's genuinely, I don't have any regrets in life. One of my regrets in life is not learning Polish, and my mum being Polish. And another regret in life is maybe not having spent more or made more effort to have a more elaborate materialistic wedding. Because material can be used to show true love to people. I've been to other people's weddings, I've been to other people's birthday parties, where they do make so much effort to really show love to others through the material that they create and prepare. Have you not had that experience where you felt deeply loved, even feeling the love of God through something material that maybe someone has given or prepared for you. It's possible. It can be done. Even the way we dress ourselves and present ourselves as holy material objects which are imbued with the Holy Spirit. Every single one of us has an incredible soul which lives in this physical body. And this body is for the sake of others. We smile and we show ourselves to be happy for the sake of others, to communicate true love through the sake of others. I put on a tie and I put on a blazer, especially to make Auntie Kyungja happy. She really likes it when I wear a blazer, even though I'd rather not. But it's my way of communicating love for her and love for you. And this is why we do things in a material way, to communicate true love. So that's my conclusion. Material for the sake of others. Materialism is damaging and harmful when it's not for the sake of God, when it's not for the sake of others, when it's not for the sake of the world. But when we take what's material and offer it to God, and offer it to others, and offer it even to the world, then it becomes holy and good, and it can communicate true love. I want us all to become abundantly blessed with material wealth. Some of us perhaps more so than others. Maybe if some of us have little, but we're grateful for what we have. And we realize what we have is a blessing from God, and I'm grateful. And I offer it for the sake of others. And I'm not going to be jealous of others. I can just have pride and joy that others maybe have more. And gratitude that there are philanthropic, generous people, charitable people who use their wealth and material for the sake of others. And maybe some of us are blessed with more. And we can find ways to express true love in ever creative ways. I feel like in order to create a new world, in order to create a new community, which is what we're all striving to be, it also needs to be done not just invisibly, not just internally, not just through the revolution of heart and culture and virtue, but it also expresses itself in what's material. What is True Mother asking for right now? She's doing a survey to find out who out there is in the creative and performing arts. Musicians, artists, animators, filmmakers, photographers. She wants them to create beautiful material things for people to imbibe, through which they can feel God's true love, through which they can feel the culture of heart. If there are folks in those areas that you know of, please encourage them to fill out that survey that is being conducted right now, so that we can create a worldwide community of people who can do something like that. When I was in Korea recently, I think in August, we had some European members there performing the most elaborate contemporary dance together with maybe some of you know Boris Serval from Germany and his art, the filmmaking that he does. It was incredibly different to what everybody else was performing at that time, and I think it some people didn't know what to expect. Now, I'll put my hands up. I'm not the biggest raving fan of contemporary dance. I find it difficult to connect to, but I could still perceive love from their offering. And I was talking with one of the sisters who was performing out here, Colette from Malta, and she was telling me her vision of creating a European-wide community of people who could work together to create material for the sake of others. I was so inspired by her vision, and I'm happy to see that this is being responded to, whether it's directly or indirectly, with this worldwide survey. Very exciting. But in our own ways, with the material that we have, I invite you to find a way to make it live for the sake of others. Would you like to stand and join me in prayer? Good morning, dear God, loving Heavenly Parent. You've created this incredible universe which is full of material wonder. We can examine it and find so many wonderful uses and practical applications of this gift that you've given to us. Even the life that we have, the physical bodies that we have, is a gift from you. And I pray that we can find a way to infuse it with virtue, to infuse love into everything that we do. That we can find a way to practice true love within the relationship between ourselves and between the relationships between each other, and ultimately in our relationships with all things too. This time of the year is a time of great material tension
where so many folks are focusing on what is commercial and material, there's not necessarily something bad in those things. But you want to see those material things being used for original purposes. And that if celebrations are being celebrated, if there are festivals, that we consider the original meaning of those things and make sure that we don't get lost in the material. That we don't forget to really love one another as we share material wealth and possessions with one another. That we can allow true love to flow. I pray that we can become people who can be masters, who, as true Father spoke about, we can have dominion, inheritance, and that we can become people who can receive all things and use it for the greater good. I pray that you will bless every single one of us with material fortune, with material prosperity, in whatever degree, and that we can find ways of using it for the sake of others, to create joy and happiness in our families and in our communities, and ultimately to return that joy back to you and comfort the material world as well. I want to offer up before this prayer in my name, Huish, of the Blessed Central Family. Amen.